How's it going, dude?
I think it's incredibly ironic that we're here to talk about a book set in the depths of the Scottish winter on the hottest day of the year. The irony just drips, just like the sweat off our brows, Luke.
I know, dude. I know. It's
What were we thinking?
this is awful.
I'm your host, Sergio Angelini, and welcome to Tipping My Fedora, where we discuss movies, books, TV, radio, and much more besides, all from the darker side of the street.
Today's special guest is Luke Deckard, not only a great friend to this podcast, but also a pretty hard-boiled podcaster himself. So I strapped him down, turned on that light straight into his face, snapped my fedora, and grilled him about his latest project, a terrific hard-boiled novel called No Saints, Only Killers. Let's see what I was able to get out of him. No crime fiction authors were hurt in the making of this podcast. Luke, welcome back to Tipping My Fedora. This is your third appearance on the show. Do you realize that? It's just like, that's amazing. Well done. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me. I didn't realize it was third, but yeah, I guess it is. So hey,
Oh, I'm
yay.
keeping score, mate. I'm keeping score. Don't you worry. So, hello. You're here without your compadre, Matthew. Let's quickly talk about your podcast.
Yeah, so me and my co-host Matthew Booth, Matt Booth, Matty Boy, of which I've never called him.
Yes, all four of them. Yes.
Yeah, Luke and the formats. Yeah, we run Cinema Sleuths over on all the podcast channels. We've been going for a couple of years now. It's a lot of fun. We originated as Mean Streets, the film noir podcast, because both Matt and I we're both crime writers. We both love film noir. We thought, oh, let's do a podcast. Let's focus it on something. Focus it on film noir. About 2 years in, we're like, this well is drying up. We don't have a lot left of like the big hitters before we have to like start thinking about other things. And then we decided earlier this year to rebrand and call ourselves Cinema Sleuths because it allowed us to continue to do film noir, both what big ones that are left, but also obscure ones. However, it also allows us to open the door to do other films and franchises that we love. So we've been able to do things like the original Star Wars trilogy, and other things. The ones that are in my head at the moment are the ones we just recorded, so they're not out yet. I would imagine. But lots of different films that we've been able to do now with this, which has been it's a lot of fun. So yes, we keep the same sort of style. All of our film review discussions are sort of investigations. So we look at the behind the scenes stuff, and then we go into detail about what worked and didn't work about the story, or sort of why something is sort of big and has remained big in pop culture, or maybe a film that we think is really good, but for some reason its stamp on pop culture has been limited, despite it maybe should having a larger impact. So we do all sorts of stuff like that. It's I think it's fun. We have a good time.
It is. It's excellent. I enjoy listening to it, and I really enjoy occasionally appearing on it too.
Yes.
So no, thanks for all that. So you mentioned that, of course, both you and Matthew are published authors. So would you do me a favor, backtrack just a little bit and tell me a little bit about your writing and your writing career and your publishing career?
Yeah. So I mean, I've been writing for a while. I think my first sort of published short story was, I think came out in like 2011, and then I then had a series of Sherlock Holmes pastiches that came out between sort of 2012 and 2016, and that was a lot of fun to sort of cut my teeth on crime fiction and mystery, and also getting published and doing some Sherlock Holmes stuff. I sort of capped off this Sherlock Holmes kind of career by doing a biography on Arthur Conan Doyle, called Welcome to Undershaw, which was a really cool book about his home in Hindhead. He had a home in Surrey that he built for his wife Tui, who had tuberculosis, so he specifically designed the house to accommodate her ailments and whatnot. And now that house is a school that caters to kids with physical disabilities, stuff like that. So that I wrote the book kind of in partnership with the school, and it's all about what Conan Doyle was doing during that period. So that was kind of the sort of the where I sort of capped off my Arthur Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes writing career, which was good fun. And then when that finished, I was well, I say finished. I chose to finish it.
Right.
When I stepped away from doing that kind of stuff, I decided to go and do a master's in creative writing and sort of chase chase the writing on an academic level, and started refocusing how I wanted to write and what I wanted to write into more kind of hard boiled noir kind of writing. And it's funny because when I look back at some of my Holmes novels or collections, they're very while I think I do an okay job maintaining a Conan Doylean voice, Watsonian voice, the stories are far darker, probably more noir influenced. Subconsciously, they are darker than kind of your average Holmes stories. So I found that quite in hindsight, that was interesting to as I looked back, like, oh yeah, I was kind of already deviating, you kind of, with the grittiness quite early on. So yeah, so then I, started doing kind of keeping within historical fiction. I was for my MA, I wrote a historical novel that was essentially sort of the prototype that would become the last book that I wrote, No Saints Only Killers. So this sort of proto version was a 1920s thriller, private eye, set in London, set in the same kind of setting, Percy Street detective agency in central London. The detective had a different name at that point, but yeah, so it was just sort of I was sort of finding my feet with that, and had a really good time writing that most of that novel during my MA, and then went straight from my MA into a PhD where I wanted to take elements of what I was doing with that, but then focus it on sort of a slightly different setting. Kept the London stuff, but really wanted to tell a story about Edinburgh. And so I wanted to use this detective that I had created during my MA, but use him to leave London and go to Edinburgh on an investigation. And so yeah, so I kind of went from writing grittier golden age stuff to just proper hard boiled pulp fiction.
The novel was published earlier this year, and it's a book that I very much enjoyed, and I think No Saints Only Killers has a number of pretty unique points in many respects. I mean, I can't think of a lot of novels about an American private eye in Scotland in the 1920s. I really can't. Now, what I wanted to find out from you is that did you start with that idea? I said, well, this is something I haven't seen before. Not exactly where do you get your ideas from, but where did the inspiration for telling this particular story in this particular way really come from? What motivated you?
The genesis of that happened during my master's when I was doing the proto novel. Because when you do a master's, you're meeting with people on a regular basis, doing class, doing workshops, all that kind of stuff. And while I've never had any pushback on my Sherlock Holmes novels, because no one knows who I am, no one knows that I'm American, right? And I was writing from London, and so no one is associating that. Being in a classroom with other British students, they hear my voice, and then they kind of push that voice onto whatever I'm presenting on the page.
Mm.
And I kept getting quite annoying, stupid comments from certain people in the in the room
Okay.
that just couldn't see past the physical being of who I am being American and the character on the page being British. And I thought, fuck it. I'm I'm just gonna change it. He's just gonna be American because again, like that does actually add a unique angle to it. Haven't really seen that before. The closest I'd really come to seeing that was Ripper Street. One of the three characters, there's Homer Jackson, who is a former Pinkerton and physician who works with Edmund Reed and the other guy, and he's the sort of he's the Watson guy who gets stuff, does all the medical stuff for them while also being a tough cool guy. And I thought, well, realistically, that's Victorian era. I really want to explore the 1920s because I'm a big fan of the Jazz Age, and I love that particular era. And when I look back at novels at that time, you're not going to really find any novel with an American PI living in that part of the world, but you do find a lot of Hemingway novels and people like that who are writing, Orwell, out down and out American, down and out in Paris and in London. These perspectives of Americans in Europe in a post-war situation. So I was like, well, that's actually quite, there were a lot of Americans kicking about around that time anyway, so it's not that unheard of. But in terms of crime fiction, hardly any. I don't think I've really come across that kind of character in that kind of setting in that timeline. I don't want to say I'm the first, but I just have not found that close comp that is like, oh, here's another version of this, which honestly, frankly, made that one of the most difficult parts of selling this book because publishers don't like the First World War era, post-war. They don't like the 1920s.
Really?
Oh
Okay.
yes, yeah. If you're not doing World War II, or post World War II, just post World War II, or early or late 30s, it's tough. So it was a battle to get this one out.
Is it the living memory argument? Is that it? When you're outside of a living memory?
I do think that's part of it, but I mean, at this point in time, the living memory of World War II is,
Well, there's lots of people born in the 1930s still around.
yeah, there's some,
They're
there's some,
shrinking, but there are none who remember 1922, obviously,
yeah,
or what
yes,
have you. So, but obviously, a lot of it is to do with just the perception of what sells in the
yes,
marketplace. And is it partly that idea of that the 1930s is the era of the cozy mystery novel, or even the hard-boiled
yes.
variant, but it's 30s and 40s? Is that it really?
I think that's part of it. I do. I think World War II sells and just
Right.
has sold so well for so long and will probably always be a big seller. Whereas it's interesting when you look at the like Victorian period. Victorian sells
Mm,
like mad all the time, all the time.
right.
World War II sells like mad all the time. But just this, there is just something obscure about that period of sort of, I would say kind of 1910s or teens through to like 1929. That kind of 20-year period is feels like there are fewer crime novels particularly set in that era. Maybe if I had written a general fiction story, that might have been easier to sell. But on the crime side, they love that backdrop of either the Victorian period or like Renaissance period. I remember I remember one,
Really?
oh my god, I remember one publisher showed like so much interest, had me on the edge of my seat for about 2 weeks, constantly emailing me back and forth, asked me if they wanted saw this if I saw it as a series. I was like, oh my god, I think this is gonna go somewhere. And then after about 2 weeks, they said, oh, you know what, we're gonna say no. We actually want Renaissance era. And I'm like,
Well, like
like
Da Vinci. Yeah.
it's like, all right, cool, whatever, fine, whatever. Enjoy your day. There are also hot moments, hot periods that come and go. But yeah, it was an interesting sort of battle to kind of get this book out because I set it in a very difficult era that publishers don't particularly love, and the hard boiled aspect, the historical hardboil aspect doesn't sell it as well as if it were, say, modern day Reacher, Michael Connolly, that stuff
Mm.
is easy to sell now, whereas historical hardboiled stuff is trickier. It's trickier to do.
And yeah, there's the nostalgic element, I suppose, and that
Mm.
too, because obviously when people say Victorian, of course, it's always late Victorian, isn't it?
Oh yes,
Really?
yes.
Yeah,
It's always 1880 to 1899.
it's Holmes and Watson.
It is Holmes and Watson.
Yeah, right. Okay, looking at it from the other side, though, from
Mm,
your point of view,
mhm,
what are the challenges of writing historical fiction that's very specific? Because that
mm.
sounds to me very, very difficult. It's like you're having to check so much in terms of just factual
Mm.
information, or even the way you convey something verbally is something you have to think about. I mean, for you, what was it like? Because it sounds really hard work.
It was really difficult, actually. It was, and I added to that problem by setting it not just in the UK, not just partially in London, but mostly in Edinburgh. So, colloquialisms, dialect, all that kind of stuff. I set myself a huge mother effing challenge on that one because no, it's true. I mean, case in point, there's a scene set on the Scotch Express, shot you straight from London King's Cross to Edinburgh Waverley. It was not the Flying Scotsman, that hadn't been around just yet at the time of this book. So I remember I kid you not, I spent weeks researching what the interior of the cars would look like, all to basically essentially not go into any of that detail.
But you needed to know.
I felt like I needed to know, but then it's one of those moments where I'm like, well, now I'm just sort of info dumping what this looks like. And what people all they need to know is I went to the dining car and I sat down and I ordered a chicken sandwich and it was dry.
I mean, I guess you want to make sure you know what the
Yeah.
dining car was like and where it was, and was there one, were there two, and these sorts of things. Yeah.
Yes. So things that were helpful, things were like, well, what kind of class of ticket would my detective get? What would that look like? How many people would be in that space? So, what would these, the lower class dining cars feel like or look like and stuff. So, there's stuff like that I had to get. And but then there was other bits that were just really, really effing fun because there was one scene set in a dance hall in Edinburgh. And that very dance hall historically it existed, but was also a place where Sean Connery used to be a bouncer outside of. So anyone
Not
who
in
has
1922,
no, yeah,
presumably.
obviously not 1920s, but like several years later when he was a young man before he became an actor, he worked there. So it's like
Right.
there's just you kind of find little fun historical bits of like what this place really existed in the 1920s. I can use that. That's great. But then it has this other thing. If like, you happen to know a little bit about Sean Connery, you might also realize that, hey, that's the place where Sean Connery worked as a young man. The other thing is like streets and maps and things like geography changes. What's great about Edinburgh now is that a lot of Old Town is more or less exactly the same
Mm.
in terms of its layout, but even that is changing quite a bit. But sort of or Newtown rather is pretty much the same. Old Town there's a lot that is the same, but there's a lot that's different. There's a particular kind of muse that there's that I set a scene in sort of near Cowgate that doesn't exist anymore. But I found that this place did exist, and I'm like, this was this cool little dark alleyway that I wanted to use, and it's no longer there. And the benefit of it no longer being there is I can kind of do what I want with that space. But if someone were to challenge me, but well, it was actually there. You want to be accurate. You want to find those historical accuracies, and it does take a lot of time. It does take a lot of research, but at the same time, you don't want to get overly bogged down by the historical component of things,
Mm.
um, because this is fiction to some degree. That doesn't mean it gives you necessarily the license to just make crap up, but you can sort of work on a sliding timeline a little bit. If something appears a little bit earlier than what it should, you can kind of play with little elements of that. Case in point, you could look at maybe like the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes film. There's things that are in there like the silencer. I think in the second film he was toying with the silencer. Sherlock Holmes, it's implying he invented the silencer, but obviously he didn't exist. But you can kind of there's things like that you can kind of play with in a tongue in cheek way and have fun with. I don't think I really did anything egregious like that per se. But there's just but there's just things you sort of have you can do a little bit of fun with or sort of include a little bit of something to play with the era a little bit and have fun with some of the historical accuracies or the inaccuracies from time to time.
But also, this isn't one of those books where real historical people mingle with fictional characters, as far as I'm aware. Are they all fictional in the
No.
book?
I don't think I included anyone real, and if I did, I don't remember.
Well, it was interesting because there's a novelist in it, and it was interesting because I thought that doesn't ring a bell. Did a quick check, says, "Aha,
Mm,
okay." So I'm going to approach this character differently since the character's made up. If you said I don't know, Edgar Wallace or something, then okay,
yes,
I would have been more concerned, but or I would have paid attention in a different way. So well, they're not going
exactly.
to get killed off, that sort of thing. On the other hand, were you tempted, as John Dixon Carr used to do with his historical novels, to have notes for the curious, to have footnotes or things at the end to explain which bits were true and which bits you might have massaged a bit, and to give people the historical background that you used?
No, but I think that's because I wrote this novel for my PhD. So
Mm,
all of that information was going into my research paper.
right.
And I wanted to just for me, I like the separation of the two. I like to just that's the academic stuff, all that kind of stuff is going to be in my research paper. Someone wants to go read that, they can go find that in some library somewhere if they really want. Because I had friends who do that. One of my friends who writes the Bonnie McBird, who writes the Sherlock Holmes stories for the HarperCollins, she does that. She includes a lot of information in the back of hers, and I totally get it. I get why someone might want to do that. It's just one thing. It just doesn't appeal to me. It's like that just seems like extra work, and I don't want to go to that. I want to write the stories. I want to have fun writing the stories. I want to leave the research on my desktop, in those documents. I don't want to add more pages to the book, to overly explain myself, I think.
Sure. Now there is a lot of swearing in your book, Luke.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, how do you was that a very conscious decision, or is that one of those things where you have to modulate that, or you get feedback on what's that like?
Um I remember I remember once early on getting beta readers to read a version of this, and I will never use beta readers ever again.
Okay.
I will use friends and trusted colleagues. I will never use random beta readers, is what I'm saying. Other people who want to use them, all power to you. But I remember this one lady emailed me back and she's like, this is just far too sweary for me. And it's like, and then you sort of realize, all right, well, her background is like a middle-aged conservative American background. And I'm like, yeah, you're not the target audience for this book, sweetheart. Sorry. That makes sense. Yeah, I don't know why you asked to read it in the first place, frankly, but yeah. When it comes to the swearing, I people swear. They've always swore. There's always been cursing. Polite society keeps it out of books and films of the time. I mean, we know from our Mean Streets days, man, and looking at old, film noirs, like the Big Sleep is the Bogart Big Sleep is drenched with innuendo, and some of it, it got past the censors because they just didn't quite, depends on who's writing. You know what I mean? Uh, like we know what they're getting at. So it's there. It's in reality, off screen, off the page, people would have been swearing. It's just part
Hmm.
of it's just a part of life. Not everyone swears as much as I do. I understand that. Probably took inspiration just from the fact that I swear a lot, and don't care, and shows and things like Peaky Blinders and Ripper Street. They swore all the time in that. Probably more than what is historically accurate, but I don't care. I think it worked. I think I mean I tried to make sure that I wasn't using swear words or terms that were were modern. Yeah, I would have kept it within sort of era specific, but everyone's always been for over 100 years to say fuck off.
You weren't tempted to find some kind of early 1920s type of Scottish swearing that was particularly germane and eccentric and
Um,
no longer being used?
I think I did look for certain things like that, but I
Hmm.
one criticism I did get early on was sort of adding too much location specific kind of terminology.
Right, right.
And so I did dial things back on that front. There's the scene in the bar in that dance hall has a
Mm.
quite chunky section of someone speaking in very heavy dialect, which I used a dictionary, Scottish, to help piece that together. Yeah, I was instructed to maybe dial this back a little bit because it might be too heavy for general readers and stuff. So no, yeah.
There's also plenty of humor, and I have to say, one of my favorite little moments in the book is the bit when he decides he's going to have to operate on the teddy bear, which I thought was great. In fact, I was going to ask you, would you mind reading that to our listeners?
I took the suitcase with Greta Mathis's belongings to my hotel. There were still no messages from Harry. Checking was merely a fool's hope, and the clerk said no one had come in asking for me. If Spatty and the Grey Man were with her, they were taking their time. Maybe my suspicion was wrong, and Harry wasn't with them, or so I hoped. In my room, I placed Greta's weathered suitcase on the bed. A faded GM was on the side, where she had inscribed her initials at some point. I snapped it open and itemized everything. The clothing, a couple of faded, hole-ridden dresses and blouses, went into a pile. There was an empty bottle of Palmer's Apple Leaves perfume. The label was scuffed and faded. I lifted the lid and inhaled. The scent took me back to when I was a young boy, reminded me of my mother. Every Sunday she put on the same perfume before we went to church. I wondered if she still did that. I placed the bottle next to the clothes. The photo of Greta's cousins gave me nothing. I wished one of them were alive and here. Even if one had lived, I thought there was no telling if the British government would have let them back in the country, like Mary Palvini's husband. I removed the communist and Lithuanian literature last. Standing over the bed, I picked up The Bear and held the tag. It didn't make sense to me. Why would Dad send it? This couldn't possibly be the thing he wanted to get back. No one would kill a man for a damned stuffed bear, right? That's when I noticed something odd. The seam. The left was a thick white thread, while the right was a thin golden yellow that matched the fur. That had been impossible to see in Mary Palvini's dark home. Now it was plain as day. I squeezed the bear's stomach and felt something hard in its guts. A box. The bear's glass eyes looked anxious now. He and I knew what needed to happen. I flipped open my pocket knife and went to work. The first incision started at the top of the left seam and went straight down. Cotton intestines spilled out. The operation was crude but effective. I reached inside and removed the hard object. A blue velvet ring box with a note rubber band around it was in my hand.
Can I ask you, you've alluded to the fact that you are, of course, an American expat living in the UK. Are there elements of the book beyond that are sort of autobiographical, or that you drew on certain things? Not literally, I would imagine, unless you're much, much older than you look, Luke. But
No.
I was wondering, how much does that sort of reflect, to a certain extent, your own ending up here?
Yeah, no, I think I once I sort of resigned myself to the fact that my protagonist was going to be an expat, was going to be this American in London. I wanted to really, I started to really think about my experience and what I feel towards the country, and looking at a lot of similarities. And there's a lot of similarities, sort of, on a socio-political level that, kind of echo, what happened then, or kind of happening now. We're all sort of, that level of disillusionment hasn't really gone away. Moving to the UK was a nice eye-opening experience. Was a very good challenging experience. It made helped me kind of see things in a different way, experience the world in a different way, and reassess and reevaluate the way the states handles themselves, presents themselves, and all that sort of stuff. When I moved here, it was in my very very early 20s, and coming across other Americans who were very almost hated being here, and sort of made me question why are you here? I
Right.
don't even understand why did you
Yeah.
come all the way over here? I don't get it. And have this sort of American chip on their shoulder of how great we are over there, while at the same time I'm thinking, man, we are really shit over there. Like, this is like, what is going, like, my God. So yeah, there are elements of I think Logan's sort of approach to his his feelings towards America that are very in some ways similar to mine. Obviously, he's coming at it from having just gone through the First World War, and that sort of like, what was the point of all of that? He's suffering from PTSD. I do not suffer from PTSD, except for having a child. No. um,
Ah,
I'm kidding. She is adorable.
she is.
Yeah. So there were elements of that sort of, looking kind of reacting to what America does, and how you feel about that, and how that is experienced from outside of the country, and particularly the religious aspect. I do come from a
Mm.
very, very religious part of the world. I have him coming from kind of suburban Chicago. I'm from suburban Indianapolis, very, very close in terms of location proximity. One of those things like, that, the Bible Belt, heavy religion, that kind of stuff was very much drawn on the hypocrisy of what I experienced growing up within that sort of framework, and the sort of just falseness of it all. The older I got, the more aware of that I became, and the more distance I wanted between myself and that kind of world, because of what I saw and experienced, and sort of, I didn't put anything like a one-to-one in the book. So kind of what happens with Logan and his background and family and stuff is not necessarily what I experienced firsthand, but it is taken. There is the emotional experience of that is very true to some of my experiences.
So, more importantly, will Logan be back in another adventure?
I would like for Logan to be back. I think it depends on appetite. If people like him enough and respond enough, the publisher might be okay with another Logan Bishop. I do have this. I've always sort of wanted to retackle the proto novel
Ah,
and Logan Bishopify that. It's a good story. It's really fun. I really like a lot of elements to it, and I think could make for a fun sequel. But it just depends on what people think. If they like this, then if enough copies sell, then I might get the okay. If they don't, then well, I got to look to other things, which heyo.
so remind us again. How can we get the book, and in what formats is it available?
You can get the book where all books are sold. So if you're in the States, you can get it from Borders is no longer a thing. What's the bookshop in the States?
Barnes and Noble. Yeah.
Barnes and Noble. There we go. You can buy it from Barnes and Noble. You can buy it from Amazon. You can buy it from the anywhere books are sold. You can buy it. It's available in paperback, hardback, ebook, and audiobook. The audiobook is fantastic. It's a friend of mine who narrated it. He's a professional actor. His name is Miguel Perez. He just captures Logan Bishop's voice perfectly. He is like, when I hear Logan Bishop, I hear my friend's voice. He does such a great job with Logan's voice. He's a really cool guy. Yeah, and sort of like points of separation. It's like he's been on various TV shows throughout his acting career, and
Hmm.
there's moments in time where like me and Clara will be watching some random medical drama, and I'll hear a voice, and I'm like, wait, that's Miguel. And then like he's like on screen, I'm like, oh my god, it's Miguel. But like one of the points of separation between me and Star Trek is he was Tuvok's doctor in Star Trek Voyager Endgame. So when Tuvok is going through the
Right.
Alzheimer's, he is Tuvok's doctor in that episode. And yeah, so I'm always like, so it's like, it's cool little thing. But no, he does a fantastic job. So I highly recommend the audiobook as well. If you're into that kind of thing, it's a great ride.
That's brilliant. Oh, thanks for that. So, as you know, at the end of every episode of Tipping My Fedora, I ask for a recommendation. It could be a book, it can be a film, it can be an audio drama, a TV show, something you would like to tell our listeners that they should look up, something they might be interested in.
What I've been reading lately is very different. I've hit pause on novels at the moment, and I've been really just deep diving into comic books again. Like I'm a big comic book fan. I love to read comics, but yeah, one thing I have been reading a lot of is a mixture of kind of classic Daredevil novels, but a lot of Brian Michael Bendis. runs. And in doing so, slight Daredevil recommendation, but in doing so, I wanted to read Brian Michael Bendis's Jessica Jones collections. And I highly, highly, highly recommend finding his Alias Jessica Jones volumes. I think there's 4 in the original run, and then I think there's the kind of a 14 issue the Pulse run that he did, and then there's another couple volumes as well. And so I've been really deep diving into those, and I've been finding them so much fun to sort of go back through and experience the Marvel universe, but from this very hard-boiled, disillusioned, alcohol-driven kind of sad sack that is Jessica Jones, who you do also very much love and relate to, and who just says, I mean, she's got some cracking lines of dialogue, through this as well. So that I'm going to recommend that. I really haven't been enjoying going back through something very different to what I write. Because I don't know about you, but like sometimes I just need to spend some time with a form of storytelling that isn't the type of thing that I am trying to write. Because then I get inspiration from that as well. I get probably more inspiration from looking at things that aren't the thing that I do, versus reading the stuff that I am more closely doing than the other way. Yeah,
that makes sense. Well, look, Luke, that's just brilliant. Thank you very much. And obviously, I hope we get to read a lot more Logan Bishop in the future. But in the meantime, we got to meet up for a coffee sometime when it's not so damn hot all the time. So can you make it cooler, Luke?
I'll do my best. I'll do my best.
Okay, mate. And and then we'll catch up. But in the meantime, keep it real. Keep the aircon turned up, man. Take care, chum. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
You have been listening to Tipping My Fedora, the show about all things noir. It is produced for Castiglione Publishing by me, Sergio Angelini, and our theme tune is by Petar Milinkovic, whose work is available through Tailkeeper Music. All audio clips are the copyright of their respective owners, and used under fair dealing and fair use exceptions solely for the purposes of criticism and review. Please subscribe to Tipping My Fedora wherever you get your podcast fix. And it would be great if you could leave ratings and reviews about the show at Apple Podcasts. Be seeing you.